Welcome to the Reasons to Reason podcast. I'm your host and captain, Sal Galati. This is the show that's going to talk about all the things we're not supposed to: God, religion, and politics. So strap in, prepare to get offended, and maybe, just maybe, our nation can learn how to reason again. Welcome back to the Reasons to Reason podcast. I'm going to do a little longer one today. It's an ambitious task. I'm trying to tackle a lot of different ideas, but it's all connected in the idea of religion and the atheistic religions that are believed permeating through our culture and our schools, and how that is unconstitutional, and just reshape what we view as religion and segregate that from what actually is truth. So I really want to drill down the difference between what religion is and what the Bible says, because we lump the Bible in with religion, but that's a fallacy. Just so you know, when I jump around a little bit, sometimes I've found in my life and in the last 10, 15, 20 years, as I've learned different things, that there are a lot of assumptions I made and built off those false assumptions. And sometimes you have to deconstruct some of the things that you believe to be true that weren't really true, because they kind of set you off on a bad course. So sometimes I have to kind of dig in a little bit in an area just to kind of break those things down and have you see that maybe some things I assume to be true, I can't take as rock solid truth. I have to challenge them. You remember, if you deny yourself the possibility you're wrong, you forfeit your ability to reason. So we're doing that here. I actually want to quote a song by Bob Dylan called "Gotta Serve Somebody." One of the lyrics is, "But you're going to have to serve somebody. Yes, indeed. You're going to have to serve somebody. Well, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody." So we're going to talk about religions, and then connected back to always what the biblical view is, and then the idea overarching of Marxism, which I claim is a religion, and how that really connects with what the gospel is, with the messages of the Bible, and see the harmony there actually. But just, again, they're going at it at different views. One's a man-made solution and one's God's solution. So what's religion? Here's how I define it: a series of beliefs and constructs that promise to give people meaning, fulfillment, and a productive life. Religion could have one God, many gods, or no God. So that might be earth-shattering, that there's atheism is a religion. It's a structure of belief. They can't prove that there's no God. They believe there's a God, and I'd argue there's tenets of this religion. I'm actually going to do an episode called Signs Everywhere Sign. We see these signs in the yard, and I'm going to break down what the signs say and actually how they're incoherent and inconsistent. That'll be another show. Religion is also man-made, so this may come as a shock. The God of the Bible is not interested in the various religions that man has created. Religion is completely constructed by man. God has his law and his ways, but that is not religion. So we're going to do a whole show on the Bible, unpacking that, introducing some future topics. So here's our experience. Our experience shows us that no matter how hard we try, we cannot be good. We all know this in your heart of hearts. So we always seem to fall short. Religion can make you good. And let's take a secular example. The law. Our law. Our law does not make us good. The law demonstrates how bad we are. For every law that says we shouldn't do something, it tells us we have the capacity to do it, even though we know it's wrong. So there's this tension. Why do we do the things that we know are wrong? The takeaway from there is that the law does not make you good. Religion can't make you good. So that said, there are many religions that are productive in the sense of encouraging people to be decent to one another, the golden rule, care for one another. There is value in learning the similarities and the differences in all these religions. Per the First Amendment, the state shall not establish a religion. So I'm going to quote Gandhi now. Here's what Gandhi said: "I know of no one who has done more for humanity than Jesus. In fact, there's nothing wrong with Christianity. The trouble is with you Christians. You do not begin to live up to your own teachings." So Gandhi made a fantastically accurate observation. I would say his understanding is off, okay? So people claiming to be Christians have done horrendous things. We know that. Just like every other religion. Just because you say you're something doesn't mean it's determinative of whether or not your conduct is virtuous or good. So there's a parable that Jesus gives us in Matthew 21 where he describes two sons. A father gives them instructions to do something. The one son says he'll do it but doesn't. The other son says he won't do it but does it. And then the question is, who does the will of the father? And it's the second one. It doesn't matter what you say you are, it matters what you do. So the claim of the gospel is not that I believe in Jesus, that makes me better than everyone else. The claim of the gospel is I recognize that I'm not good, I know who is, and I strive to follow him. And there's a redemptive issue there because of his sacrifice that makes us all right and good with God. But that's a Bible episode, okay? But just understanding the claim of the Christian isn't I'm a Christian so I'm better than everyone else. We pursue these virtues because our Lord is those virtues. So now, how is Marxism a religion? So you've heard Marx claim that religion is the open opium of the people and a way for those in power to keep their power. And I honestly believe that to be true. That's why I'm not a religious person. Religion does serve that purpose. It's just what's at the root of the religion. You know, we talked about Bob Dylan's quote, you got to serve somebody. So what's at the root of these things? And we'll get there. The truth is not religion. They're separate things. So Mark was railing against the religion. He was not aware he was replacing it with his own created religion. He wasn't replacing it with truth. We'll still keep unpacking. I know this is maybe some foreign stuff. So instead of a belief system that worshiped God, he set up one that worshiped the state and trusted the state to deliver salvation and usher in the utopia. So it's just serving the state. You're either going to serve God or you're going to serve the state. You see, it's a religion. Marxism now, here's like where some bad assumptions lead to bad ideologies. Marxism is rooted in the material worldview. It's also rooted in Darwinism, which is also materialistic. That all there is this material world. So that theory is obviously not a fact. Some of us sense things outside of the material. I could just make simple examples. Love. Can you touch love? Love is immaterial. I tell my kids all the time, you are that person in your head, that's talking to itself. That's you. The body is a temporal thing. That's the immaterial. You can't find that. You can't weigh that. There's something there that's immaterial. So Darwin's book, and I alluded to the title in the last episode, but now I have the full title for your consideration. How that ideology spurred Hitler into what he ended up, his religion that he imposed on the world. On the origin of species by means of natural selection, all good so far, and the survival of the fittest, okay, in the preservation of favored races. Wow. So his title leads to the conclusion that there's certain races are better off than others. So you can see how eugenics and all these types of ideologies have bore from this fake religion that was perpetrated in the university. And now finally the holes of it are coming to light and gaining traction. And like I alluded in the other episode, if you look at the serious scientists, even though they're not subscribing where we came from in the variety of life to God, they are saying, hey, we got to come up with a better theory. This is a farce. So to show the connection between Marx and Darwin. This is Engels writing to Marx. Darwin, by the way, who I've been reading just now, is absolutely splendid. There was one aspect of teleology that had yet to be demolished, and that has now been done. And Marx wrote back to Engels, this is the book which contains the basis in natural history for our view. So you see the connections here? So it was in that day, and should be today, which is we've been bombarded with these religions that have told us that we came from nothing. It was hard for people to look at the creation and not think that there must be a creator. It gnawed at people. That it was obvious. It was evident. The founders said it was evident that there was a creator. They felt Darwin finally, which all these people that didn't want to acknowledge that wanted to rebel against that, they finally found what they thought was a logical explanation that could explain everything we see and perceive without a creator. And like I said before, that theory has got a ton of holes in it now. And the holes just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So their religion was that there was nothing but the material world, and they had a basis to work out the religion on the world, culminating in communism and the utopia, the new kingdom. So let's put it in biblical terms. God says there will be a new kingdom. And I'm going to show the comparisons between the two at the end. I think that's going to be a really interesting connection. But it is a religion to impose the state's will on the people to make things perfect, to achieve perfection. Why the state shall not establish a religion but pursue the truth. So this is our Constitution now. I'm going to read the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. I hope now you understand why I think it's a good idea to have our president read the Constitution to us once a year, because all those things have been violated, grossly violated. But we're going to just focus on the first one, that the Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Now put this in context of where these people were coming out of, which was the Church of England, a state-instituted religion. That's not truth, right? We hear these people talk about the ministry of truth. Some of these ideas that we used to read in novels, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we couldn't even imagine a world where that would happen. And now it's happening. They're trying to say that we need people to control words to decide what's true and what's not for us. No. I'll do that myself. I'll trust my mind to do that. I don't need you telling me what the truth is. This is the idea of like these debates and the fact checking. The two candidates can present. If one's lying, I'll figure it out. I don't need the guy that's moderating it fact check incorrectly and confuse the whole issue. So I hope we get to that place. I hope at least least we see how this is unsustainable, that we can't have a certain select people control what we hear and determine for us what's true and what's not true. So let's finally get to the modern religions, right? And I think these are all sects of atheism at the end of the day. And we're going to go one by one, how they're in the schools, what the biblical explanation or alternative is to what their religion says. And we'll see if we at the end get this connections between Marxism and then what the Bible actually says and what's the truth. So G.K. Chesterton, he was an English author. He wrote another good quote. The problem with not believing in God is not that you will believe in nothing. It is that you will believe in anything. And isn't that the truth? So that's where we're at right now, where we have some of these ideas that we all know they're not true, but because we don't know what's behind it, we don't really know how to unpack them. So we're going to try to do that today. So first religion, gender fluidity. So the idea that genders are not static or that there are more than two is one of these religions. One pontificating that people can find true happiness and meaning once they arrive at one of the many choices of identity. People are entitled to practice this religion, but it has no place in the publicly funded schools. So I believe that this religion leads children and families down a primrose path to surgeries, lifelong pharmaceuticals, and confusion, only to be left with regret and disappointment. So again, this isn't a place coming from a place of judgment. People struggle with their identity, okay? It's what's the answer. We talked about, if I feel I'm a heart surgeon, does that qualify me to perform heart surgery? Why do we not think of it that when it comes to this? And with children, nonetheless. Children are impressionable and they trust adults in their life. And if the adults in our life are feeding into confusion, the child will continue to be confused. So here's the biblical alternative to gender confusion. We are all made in the image of God. Atheism doesn't offer that. Your identity is in Him who created you. Your fulfillment and peace rest in that truth. You do not need to find your identity elsewhere. So when we talk about what's behind these things in the spiritual element, let me introduce the devil's role in the world. It's to confuse people and disorient them from who they are and who made them, okay? Can you see that spirit here? Confusing children. And again, it's built off the idea of Darwinian evolution. We came from nothing. Who's to say we can't change sexes in that model? It actually leads a question into origin. Was the first species male or female? And when did the secondary part of the species come? You get what I'm saying? Why is there male and female? Why isn't there four? It just screams a creator. These are questions to ask that you kind of get presented something and you just assume it's true because the teacher's telling you it, but you never question it. And we need to start questioning things again. So Darwinian evolution, another religion. As we spoke about before, this theory is that there's a common descent from a single organism that arrived into being by chance and no explanation. From there, through environmental pressures and a series of mutations, we have the variety and complexity of life we have today. So here's the thing to think about. If you have all the ingredients for a cake, no explanation how those ingredients got there, but all the ingredients are there. No matter how much time passes, those ingredients will not assemble to make a cake unless there's an agent acting upon it. So it's the same thing with origin. You could try to explain how all these things came to be. Actually, there's a organic chemist named James Stewart. You should look him up. And he's not making a claim that he can prove God created. He's making a claim that the way they're going about it is completely incoherent. And he's qualified to comment on this topic. And interesting enough, he's a Messianic Jew. So he's ethnically Jewish, and we'll talk about what does that even mean, because even those terms are all confused. Ethnically Jewish, but believes in Jesus, interestingly enough. And he's mocked and ridiculed for that, but nonetheless, look at his science, look at his argumentations, and you decide for yourself. So there's no explanation from life starting from matter and not a mind, okay? So those are the alternatives. Did mind come from matter, or did matter come from mind? As time has gone on, we've come to realize that every single cell organism is terribly complicated and demands a creator. When Darwin was working, we thought it was just like a blob, there wasn't much to it. But as we dig in and we get more sophisticated, we can see it's so intricate that to think that it just came from nothing is insanity. Not logically couldn't happen, but just even statistically it couldn't happen, no matter how much time you give it. So Richard Dawkins, who's another guy you should look up, and honestly over the last 10, 15 years, I've watched a lot of debates, not political debates because politicians just lie mostly. These are debates regarding people with different worldviews, and they're very passionate about them. So you get people making truthful claims of what they believe, and those debates are so fulfilling to watch. Dawkins debates many people. You should check out. He's a leading atheist. And in an interview, he was pressed on the complexity. And his suggestion was, well, perhaps aliens came and seeded life into this planet. But you see, that doesn't even answer our question, does it? Because then where did the aliens come from? It's like the who made God argument. which is a silly argument because the God of the Bible is eternal. He was before anything. So no one made God. That's the point. All the other gods were made. This, on so many levels, it makes sense. So here's just some simple failures of Darwinian evolution. First a caveat, right? There's micro and macro evolution. So micro is evolution that we've all observed and see. The fossil record shows it to us. We could observe it even in our lifetimes, how a species can change within its kind. It could get taller, longer. The beaks that he noticed on the finches changing depending on what the food source was. Bird didn't change into a cat. And I mean, I know they want to argue, oh, it was so gradual and that, but there's no evidence for it is the point. So to say, like, when you say, oh, you don't believe in evolution, no, I believe in the evolution we observe. The evolution of kinds shifting amongst kinds there's no evidence for it. That's a religion. And I've read Jerry Coyne's book, Evolution is True, I think it's called. I mean, you read this book, and this is supposedly the leading guy making a case for this religion. You read the book, and it's just like fairy tale. They're based on nothing. Well, this creature was there, and then a million years passed, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then something else happened. There's no evidence for it at all. And even these fossils, by the way, when they pull these bones up, sometimes they got a fragment of a shin bone, and they extrapolate out so many things. It's not good science. We don't have to belabor the point. You can look at it yourself. It's a religion, and if anything, what was good about the COVID issue, and I think that's why certain people that hold true to Scientism, which is another religion we're going to get to next, this worship of science, they don't want to admit on the COVID stuff, because if they admit on the COVID stuff, they'll see that everything falls apart. That a lot of things that was perpetrated on us as scientific wasn't science at all. Well, another idea, irreducible complexity. This is the idea that things couldn't have built up into like little by little. Like the human eye, for example. It's so intricate and complicated that it's either an eye or it's not an eye. There can't be this long process where the eye that has no function is getting assembled over thousands of years, not working. And then one mutation happens and then boom, the eye works. It doesn't work like that. So the consequences of this religion is depression, despair, kind of a lot of the things we see our youth struggling with. And this is what breaks my heart. It's fine. I'm not going to be upset. It's not like I need what I believe to be true to have meaning. I could derive meaning out of my mind. I think it would be illogical, but I could delude myself into thinking I have meaning. That's fine, but where it breaks my heart is the kids. The kids now are being taught that there is no point to your life. You came from nothing. You are nothing. And we're going to see the ramifications, and we're seeing those. So what's the biblical narrative? We did not evolve from the animals. We are made in the image of God. I argue the science supports that. And this is where our worth and love and all these immaterial things that we sense and perceive came from. So Scientism. So COVID, what was good about COVID, like I alluded to, brought the difference between what science is and the religion of Scientism. Science is not a blind trust in anything a scientist says. That is Scientism, and it's dangerous. So we experienced that. So here's some mantras of the religion. Trust the science. Follow the science. The consensus view. Experts say it's an appeal not to think or reason, just submit. Submit to the authority. And I see it so ridiculous, the examples of how I see it. A scientist said, well, what field of science are they in? And they're commenting on gender fluidity. A scientist said, well, what is your expertise in this particular field? Are you a physicist? What does that have anything to do with what we're talking about? So I want to point out also the consensus view, right, and the fallacy of it. Too many people are waiting to see, well, what's the majority say? That must be right. And that's so dangerous. I mean, we've had many times in our history where the majority view was wrong. Think slavery. And thank goodness we have the freedom of speech, because the freedom of speech is to protect the minority view in the event it actually is right and allow their voices to be heard to rewrite the ship. You have to think and reason. You can't just glom onto the consensus view, because everyone's insecure and no one wants to stick out. It reminds me of a story, actually, that was profound in my life. There was this kid. If he ever hears this, his name's Bargov. I was second grade or so. And Bargov was not a terribly popular kid. Forgive me, Bargov. None of us really were. I was middle of the pack kid. And there was a question that the teacher asked. Doesn't matter what the question is. She told us to stand if we thought it was this answer, sit if we thought it was the other answer. So me and Bargov are the only two kids standing. And out of cowardice, I slowly sat down. And the teacher said, "Are you sure, Sal?" And man, I was pretty certain I should be standing, but I didn't want to be wrong with this kid. And it turned out Bargov was right. And I was so mad at myself. I said, I'm never going to do that again. And that was a great lesson for me because I'd rather be right than worried about what other people think about me. Not for my pride or ego. I just want to be on the right course. I want to pursue truth. So that's kind of hand in hand with that consensus view. I got a political cartoon that I created in my mind. So when a politician says trust the science, it's the politician pointing to the scientist, and behind their back, they're handing cash to the scientist. And that's exactly what goes on. All the research and studies in these areas is funded mostly by the government. And you could see with your own eyes, whether it's climate change, which we're going to get into, and the next example is really good that we're going to talk upon. But the only science that gets funded is the science that's going to lead to the conclusions they want. So trust the science, sure. I want to trust the science, but I don't trust the scientists. What's their motive? So now we're going to get to an article that I'm glad it's still online. Hopefully, I don't know, hit it up, see if it stays online, gets pulled down. Make sure you print it out. The disgraceful episode of Lynsenkoism brings us global warming theory. So this is from Forbes. Let me read from this article. Apply today. We're wrapping up here. Hope you're enjoying the show. Also subscribe. Put on who you want to follow. That way, whenever I throw up an episode, it'll just post. And just spread it around. I'm hoping this is getting people thinking and you're enjoying it. Give me feedback too. I started an email, reasonstoreason@gmail.com. Send me a note, ideas or whatever, comments. I'm all ears. So Lysenko became the director of the Soviet Lenin All-Union Academy of Agricultural Sciences in the 1930s under Joseph Stalin. He was an advocate of the theory that characteristics acquired by plants during their lives could be inherited by later generations stemming from the changed plants, which sharply contradicted Mendelian genetics. So that you could change the plant, like rip the leaves off, and then the next generation of the plant would grow without the need of leaves. This is the insanity. Things like that. So Lysenkoism was politically correct, a term invented by Lenin, because it was consistent with the certain broader Marxist doctrine. Marxists wanted to believe that hereditary had limited role even among humans, and the human characteristics changed by living under socialism would be inherited by subsequent generations of humans. Thus would be created the selfless new Soviet man. How interesting. So the biblical view is that we need to be born again. We need to be made new. A heart of stone to a heart of flesh. Marxism has the same doctrine in a religion. They just are going to impose it though. The state can impose it on the people and change them. See the connections? We're going to really wrap this up really nicely in the end, I hope. You're going to see the connections here and which one's actually true. So Lysenko was consequently embraced and lionized by the Soviet media propaganda machine. Think Fauci here? You know, don't want to get into a Fauci defense, Fauci bad, Fauci good, but I mean, the guy was paraded around as the messiah. Scientists who promoted Lysenkoism were with fake data and destroyed counter evidence were favored with government funding and official recognition and award. Ha ha! That's what's happening now in our fields of science. You don't get funding. You get demoted. You get banished off the campus. Look at it. Go look at these arguments that are out there and see how people are treated. And that's another evidence to me of who's telling the truth. So like take a Fauci and take some of the doctors that were going against what Fauci was saying during the pandemic. I don't know who's true. I can't tell who's telling me the truth. But here's a way to kind of distill this. If the person on one side of the fence is getting decredentialed, censored, banished, punished, and they continue to say something, man, they must believe that's true. The other guy's profiting by the messaging coming out of his mouth. So that's not a proof of what's true, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Lysenko and his followers and media acolytes responded to critics by impugning their motives and denouncing them as fascist, resisting the advance of the new modern Marxism. Sound familiar? We got censorship on social media and insulting by the media. Here's another thing. Usually when someone's telling the truth, you'll notice the counter doesn't talk about what they're saying. They just demean their character because they can't refute what they're saying. So you'll see that often. It's actually a reason why I came to faith in Jesus. There's a lot of similar evidences here that are in line with that kind of dynamic that happens. The VI Lenin Academy of Agricultural Sciences announced on August 7th, 1948 that thenceforth Lysenkoism would be taught as the only correct theory. All Soviet scientists were required to denounce any work that contradicted Lysenkoism. Ultimately, Soviet geneticists resisting Lysenkoism were imprisoned and even executed. So we're not there yet, but man, we're getting close. Everything else happened. They just haven't been rounding up and shooting the dissent or throwing them in jail. Political dissent, yeah, those guys are getting thrown in jail. Lysenkoism was abandoned for the correct modern science of Mendelian genetics only as late as 1964. So we had 14 years of insanity there. While those practicing it thought they were progressive and they insulted and marginalized everyone in their way. So does this sound familiar? Okay. So the article brings this to comparison to climate change, which I believe is another religion. And then we're going to wrap up this thing real tight, which I think you're going to enjoy. So a thought exercise. Compare what happened with Lysenko with man-made climate change science going on now. Can you spot the similarities? Politically correct theory to promote more state control over a private economy. Government money only supporting scientists producing complementary results. Requiring skeptics of the religion to denounce their opposing views. Demeaning and slandering anyone who proposes a different conclusion. So what are the consequences of this, by the way? The kids are terrified. The kids are frantic. They literally think that the world's going to end in 5, 6, 7 years if we don't put up more solar panels and have electric cars. All these technologies are failed, mostly. I'm not going to say all. They're all subsidized. They wouldn't stand on their own 2 feet. And are they really even helping the environment? No. There's drastic consequences to our environment. I love the environment. I love the creation. I want to preserve it. But what we're doing is madness. And it's driven by a fake religion. And subsequently, it's driven by a Ponzi scheme of a lot of people making a lot of money off of this. Okay, I'm going to do another episode called Mafia and Politics, because that's what's going on here. So all these positions seems to be just different branches of the same atheistic religion. None of it's based in logic and reason, but emotions and feelings. And this is why I hope it gets taken up that through the courts, that these things need to be taken out of our schools. People are outraged that in Texas they just passed, and we're seeing this more and more, and I hope we see more and more, that the Bible will be part of the curriculum. There's a difference between pushing a religion and looking to a book that's foundational in our understanding of everything. It's a pillar of our sane civilization. We need to understand what the Bible says. I made examples for you before. It's not that you have to believe everything in it, but you have to understand how our country came to be and that it's rooted in the concepts in the Bible. Law, government, it's all there. We can't understand anything if we don't understand that. So that's why it needs to be part of the curriculum, not to push the religion, to have an understanding and pursuit of truth. So what would Jesus say now? He would never want the state to establish a religion. He would want everyone to find the truth on their own, regardless of the culture or religion of the time. So the truth he shared was never to be imposed by force, but appeal to man's reason and prioritize the ethics of love. Now that word love. Love's not like the world defines it, by the way. So here's how Jesus defines it. No greater love has no other than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. So when you see the sign, love is love, I hope you understand that that's a little different than what we're talking about love there. And that'll be in our signs everywhere sign episode coming up. You'll never find Jesus teaching his followers to impose by force. So even when he was taken to be crucified and one of his followers defended him with a sword, he rebuked his follower and healed the captor. So what does that tell you? Now, all this stuff, all these religions, we kind of alluded to in the beginning. I believe there is an entity behind it. I believe there's a spirit of confusion, and whether you want to call that the devil or whatever. I hope you see that these things are connected and they're not all separated, all these ideologies. And I think there is a grand conspiracy. It's not a bunch of guys in a room figuring this all out. I think there's a spiritual conspiracy that's kind of working through all these things. And the way I describe the devil is, look, he's like, I like to fish. He's a fisherman, okay? And he's got a box of lures, and he knows the lure that's going to grab you. So whatever you're struggling with, he's going to throw it at you, and you're going to bite. So all these different things, they all connect, and they're all different. But looking at it, taking a step back, and you go, why are all these people aligned on all these issues? On issues that don't make any sense. You'll see the conspiracy. So a final thought on communism. Because in the end, like many failed ideologies, it has good intention, okay? It seeks to accomplish without God the thing that can only be accomplished with God. So I'm going to give you a story. I'm a communist, by the way. I'm going to give you a little story. My home, my wife is a wonderful mother, but she doesn't work. And I go to work and I share everything with my family. And it works. And we're all pretty content. So content, I should go to my neighbors on either side and say, look, you want to be communists with us? And if we're aligned in values and culture, we could probably pull that off. And then we say, hey, this is working great. Let's do it down the block. You can see how it's getting harder. Do it at the city level, the state, the nation. You could just see the further you go away from that nuclear family, the harder it gets. So my argument's what's going down as you get further away from the nuclear family? And the word is love. The love's going down. So the new kingdom is explained to us as being communistic. Everyone's going to have what they need. Everyone's going to work. No one's going to be selfish or greedy or upset or jealous or envious, because we will be made new. We will be reborn. We will be made with a heart like God's heart, perfect heart. which, interestingly enough, that's what the Marxists are trying to accomplish. But they could not accomplish it by imposing their will. What Marxism, communism ultimately devolves to is you have to just start getting rid of people that aren't falling in line. And it always ends that way. So if people want to blame God for all the wars that we have and we're fighting over this, I think you're ignoring all the death that came from the atheistic worldviews. A lot of people were killed because they were trying to impose this ideology and it never worked. You can't change people by force. You change them with love. Okay? And I hope that resonates and it makes some sense. And you see the connections between these things. Look, and I'm not trying to push what I believe on anyone. That's not the point of the show. It's just to get you to think. It's what I believe. After a lot of thought, I think it's reasonable. I think it's logical. It's all the things that I'm striving. I think it's true. And it doesn't just make me feel good. It's true. I've had someone say, oh, you believe this stuff because it makes you feel good. Look, man, if it weren't true, I wouldn't believe it. I'm not a silly person like that. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Got a couple more in the works. Again, send me a note on reasonstoreason@gmail.com. Subscribe on Spotify and iTunes and all those places. And keep listening and talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us for another episode. I hope I got you thinking and out of your comfort zone. Believe me, the biggest fear your government has is a population that is thinking and talking to one another. So get out there, take a risk, start a conversation, make a friend, and reason with each other. Share the show with someone who you think needs to hear it. I wish you peace and love.